Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. And today we're going to be taking a look at another legendary plane. This is Herpa's 1/500 scale McDonnell Douglas DC-10 in the Northwest Airlines livery. Now, this is a plane from the 1990s when Northwest Airlines was cooperating with KLM to form KLM Northwest. And you can see this is Herpa catalog number 500104. And here at the back of the box, we have some data on the plane, like the fact that it has a wingspan of 50.29 meters, a length of 55.45 meters, because this is the DC-10-30, and a height of 17.68 meters. Of course, at the very front, you get to see a real picture of the plane. But enough of that, let's unbox it. And as always, I'll use my pick here to not damage these flaps. Now, I got this plane for €9 from a store called mw-moba.de. And so here is the plastic covering. And here is the plane. So this is the first version of the Northwest DC-10 that Herpa released. The second version had a bluish-gray fuselage, and the third version had the dark gray fuselage again, like this first version does, but also had all its doors outlined in white, had silver frames around the cockpit windows, and cargo doors printed on. Now, my version doesn't have any of that, but like I said, I ended up getting this for €9, which is really a steal. Haters call this the death craft, but the truth is the DC-10 was simply the first true wide-body workhorse of civil aviation back in the day, because the 747s were reserved only for the long routes between continents with the big airports, while the 727s and the DC-9s were usually domestic. The L-1011 was less common in number, so the DC-10 was the one that made aviation more than just the rich people hobby that flying used to be in the 50s and 60s with planes like the Super Constellation, the Convairs, or even the early DC-8s. With a range of 9,600 kilometers, masses of everyday people could be transported across continents to many countries at reasonable prices. And so when you suddenly change from narrow body to wide body and start transporting a lot more people at once, when something bad happens, a lot of people will perish at once. And that, I suppose, was what earned these planes a bad name in the early years of operation. And as they say, airline safety has been written in red ink. But by the 80s and 90s, they had become safe. And I think Biman Bangladesh continued using them up until the last decade. So we'll start off our review by taking a look at the port side of the aircraft, as always, at the L1 door over here. Now these doors seem to have a thick frame at the bottom, probably for where the air stairs are supposed to connect. And you can see that they have one window in the door. And as we move along the side of the aircraft, You get to see the Northwest titles, and right next to it, we actually have the KLM Worldwide Service, I think. Really hard to focus. But it just goes to show the print quality of Herpa back in the 1990s, that they actually even got that small lettering there right. Considering this is 1/500 scale and not 1/200 scale or anything. Down there we have an American flag. And now as we move on to the back of the DC-1030, you can see that we have the beautiful Northwest vertical stabilizer with the engine number 2 right in the middle. Now, this is also a good place to learn the difference between the L1011 and the DC-10. And you can see that the DC-10's engine number 2 is actually mounted directly onto the vertical stabilizer and has its exhaust port right behind it, while the L1011's engine number 2 actually had like an S-duct and was located somewhere where the horizontal stabilizers are, and had its exhaust port where the APUs of modern aircraft are. In terms of details, you can see that we have the silver leading edge painted on the vertical stabilizer. Here's a look at the horizontal stabilizers. They have an extra bit of coloring for the surface area. And if we take a look at the wings, they are also done pretty well. You can see that they also have that dark gray coloring for the surface. And speaking of dark gray, this livery of Northwest is actually known as the bowling shoe livery, because we got the red at the top and then the gray and the white at the bottom. It's actually one of my favorite liveries. Unfortunately, Northwest Airlines does not exist anymore. Now, taking a closer look at these engines, the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 is powered by 3 General Electric CF650s, and the engine pods are in white while the cowlings are in silver, and you can see some nice fan blade detailing in there. However, what is really bizarre is that engine number 2 does not have any fan blade detailing at all. In fact, it's just a hole. Now, this is understandable on the L1011, where the engine was not up there, but like further back, and it was just an S-duct. But on the DC-10, the engine is supposed to be up there, but Herpa forgot to model it. So that's not cool. And taking a look at the wings, you can see that we've got the flaps, the slats, the ailerons, the air brakes, everything carved really nicely. Especially the flaps look good on this plane. And considering the age of this model, because this model was made in the mid-90s, I think, it's almost 30 years old, and this is good detail level. And here's a close-up of the cockpit windows of the DC-10. There's nothing special about them. They don't have the silver cockpit window frames that the subsequent editions of this particular model came with, but I think it looks all right, especially considering the dark livery. The DC-10s ended up becoming notorious for their cargo doors not being able to indicate to the ground crew whether they have been properly locked and can maintain the cabin pressurization or not. Thankfully, this old Herpa doesn't have any. You of course have the clunky Herpa wheels. Now if we check the underside of this plane, you can see that there aren't many details here. The trailing edge fairings are pretty pathetic looking, to be honest. It does say Herpa in the middle, and you get the middle wheel of the DC-10. The one advantage of these old Herpa wheels is that they roll, which is something most modern Herpas don't do. And finally, we have a comparison to a Caledonian Lockheed L1011-100. Although that model is in an odd 1/480th scale and therefore a bit larger than it should be. Still, it gives you an idea of how the two long-haul trijets of the time looked like next to each other. One of them always kept in fond memories, while the other never managed to completely shake off its dubious reputation. So thanks again for checking out my review of the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 in 1/500 scale by Herpa. And if you're interested in more planes like this, please watch some of the other plane types that I have reviewed in the past, and as always, take care, have a wonderful day, and this is Imperial Diecast, signing out.